Welcome, everyone. We have an awesome team here that I'm thrilled and excited to chat with today. From No Responders Left Behind, we've got filmmaker Rob Lindsay, producer Kelly Zemnickis, and of course, our activist, freedom fighter, subject, John Feal with us. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Thank you for having me.
For having us.
You know, this is one of the most important stories of my time, our lifetime. And I want both of your perspectives on it. We know that, John, you're personally, intimately part of this story. But for you guys as filmmakers, how did you come into this story? Do you have a personal tie to not only 9/11, but all those that have struggled post 9/11? Is there some reason that brought you guys to this story?
I'll start off with that one. I like a lot of people of a certain age. I remember exactly where I was that day. I was actually working with Rob at CBC Television in Toronto. But what got this ball rolling for making The Responders Left Behind was really my being a fan of The Daily Show and Jon Stewart's advocacy over the years of talking about what was happening, because it certainly was not on the news in Canada very much. I really didn't know what was going on. And specifically, December 2015, when he came back, when Trevor Noah had taken the show over, and he came back and didn't really know why he was going to be on. And it ended up being a reconstituted panel of an episode that had aired in 2010. And there were all these empty chairs on stage with him and Kenny Specht. And it brought me to tears. I was sitting on my couch. I was really affected by this and couldn't believe that this was even a thing, that these guys were still fighting for what I felt were very basic. This should be a no-brainer. They should be getting what they wanted years ago. And I tweeted at the end of the show, because John said, bombard Congress with this hashtag worst responder. And I sent a tweet, and 9/11 first responders saw it. And I just had this light bulb moment. I wrote him back. I said, what can I do to help? And he said, I'll introduce you to John Feal. And I was like, who is John Feal? So that's how it started. It was a tweet. Yeah.
And then Kelly came to me actually and said, there's that story that she just said, and that I think we should reach out to John and see what his story is, and there might be a film here. And at the time, we were working on a television series, plus I had two other films that we were making at the same time. So the idea of making another film at that particular time wasn't necessarily on my radar, but we called John and just to hear what his story was, what the story was. And we were blown away by the fact that he had been, at that point, it had already been a 10-year-long journey that he had been on.
Tell the truth, Rob. I hung up on you.
Well, no, actually, the real truth was that you said a bill had been passed, and I think a bill had been passed in Albany, and so stuff had already been happening. And then I stopped in the middle of John explaining all this. I'm sorry, who did that? And he said, I did that. Don't they speak English up in Canada? So I was like, I like this guy already. I like this guy. So we basically went down and met him, and then it just sort of ballooned from there. It was like, we knew this was a story we had to tell. As Kelly said, we didn't really know a lot about it, about the struggle of post 9/11 that everyone had gone through. So we were just, once we dove into it, we knew that this was a story that had to be told.
I mean, John, on your side, you get this phone call. You've been doing this work for such a long time. Is it a hang up? Is it a ponder? What allows you to say, hey, I'm ready. I'm ready for this?
Yeah. I mean, I say no more than I say yes. And I think I got that bad habit from Jon Stewart, who declines more interviews and events than I do. But yeah, I was at it for 11 years before Rob contacted me. And I thought about it, and we've told our story on national TV, local TV, print, magazine, the internet. But this was a chance for people in Canada and around the world to, 9/11 happened. None of us here can change what happened. There will be another 9/11 one day. We should be about solutions and problem solving. And but before we get to the next 9/11, we need to fix this one. And anybody who watches this documentary will be mad, will be upset, will cry, will laugh because I'm a silly little man. But this documentary was for everybody who suffered from that horrific Tuesday morning. Those who died that day, the heroes and the innocent lives, they were taken from us quickly. And those who died after 9/11, part of them died that day, but they lived in pain and agony until they finally lost their battle to the 9/11 devil, which is cancer. When we actually made the documentary, I told Rob and I told Kelly this many times, I felt violated. I felt dirty at times. And while I use my humor and I'm self-deprecating, that's just to mask the pain that I see every day. I've been to 190 something funerals. I paid for about 15, 16 of them. We're still actively engaged in the 9/11 community while we're trying to get legislation passed now with John again for veterans affected by the burn pits who have the same cancers as 9/11 responders. I mean, there's a documentary all by itself. But, the World Trade Center Health Program is going to run out of money in 2025. We're back in DC on that. So, every time I think I get closer to the finish line and they drag me back in, and I pick and choose my battles now, and I just don't lose. I'm 14 for 14.
Nothing like being a champion, man, and pulling these stories out. I think for me, and I probably think for a lot of viewers, there's so many stories in this story, not only your story, but Ray Pfeiffer's story, and all of these stories you're pulling together. How do you guys as a team, and you have the edit and you have John's input, how do you decide, how do you craft this? What's that edit look like? What's that story structure?
They could have did a better job with less me and more stories, but the documentary itself is a small sample size of the tens of thousands of people that are suffering. And it's a small sample size of a body of work in DC that's failed these men and women, uniform and non-uniform. And I used to think it was ideologies, but it was really ideologies that prevented a body of work from doing the right thing. And, after a while, we were that little engine that could, then we became that big engine that did. And then we just don't get in our way because we will steamroll you and punch you in the mouth. And I don't say that lightly because I got a lot of friends in Congress still. And I need them now for what we're doing, and I'm going to need them in the future. But collectively, as a body of work, they're broken. And the American people, not just 9/11 responders, deserve better.
And just like John was saying, there were so many stories within this one story. And that was sort of one of our difficulties in trying to streamline it enough that we didn't get lost in the weeds of trying to tell so many narrative threads and stuff like that. So the edit took quite a while. We actually went through quite a few different versions of the film. And to be quite honest with you, we thought we had finished the film at a certain point. And then we got word that they were going back to Congress, which ended up becoming when they went in front of the committee and everybody spoke, and Jon Stewart had that sort of speech that he gave to Congress and really gave it to him. But before that had happened, we knew that this was happening, but the film was kind of pretty close to being done at that point in our minds. But then, as I always say, the documentary gods were saying it's not done yet. Like there's still more. They're still fighting. Don't pull the plug yet. Like just keep forging forward. And the gods were right, as always, because we went down and it completely changed the trajectory of the film. The film you see today is completely different than what we thought was the film up to that point.
Looking back, I wish Rob and Kelly and their team could have got 2010 and before, because that's where the real struggle was. And don't get me wrong, the struggle is real every day. But we created a system. And we implemented our own body of work to fight Congress. and to fight the Senate and to cut through the bureaucracy and the politics, the poor leadership. And I'm going to take credit now before Kelly does. In 2010, John asked me to come on his show. And it was the best thing I never did because I said no, because I was going to DC the next morning. And I picked those 4 guys that went on the show. And then in 2015, when we did it again, Kelly, it was my idea to just put Kenny Specht up there because 2 of them already passed away. And as for John testifying in front of Congress in 2019, I took his speech away from him. I created Jon Stewart. I mean, he was a little unknown comedian, and I made the guy more famous than he is. So thank you. Let's wrap this up now.
So humble.
I'm sorry, I don't know that word.
But yeah, it just to bounce off of that too, like it was really wild in filming. When we went down, I had an idea of wanting to get to know John. I was really quite from those initial conversations, like, who is this guy who's doing this? I've never heard of this person, and look at all that he's done. And then just like every place we turned at, either the 9/11 Responders Remembered Park, or if we were at, the museum down at, it was Ground Zero. Everywhere I turned, there was someone's story. And the fact that we were just able to get like this lovely condensed version of it, just, I'm so proud of. But yeah, you could just keep going everywhere you looked. It was wild.
One thing that we touched on a bit that everyone mentioned is the amount of stories and how do you select. But when you have a subject like John, I'm sure that's another relationship you have to navigate. What was it like shooting with John and the process?
Well,
and how is John as a subject?
Well, difficult. But the subject of that story, to me, I'll be serious now, was Ray Pfeiffer and Lou Alvarez, and the thousands that suffered, and the thousands that have passed away from their illnesses. We now outnumber those who have died on that horrific Tuesday morning, and it's only going to get worse. So, I draw the bus. That's it. I led everybody in a direction where I thought was best for us, and everybody else did their part. But this story is about all of those who suffered and died.
And when we first went down to meet John, we initially weren't 100% sure what we were necessarily getting into. We thought maybe at the very, very first that we would do a piece about the park that Kelly mentioned. John has a park that's dedicated to all those who have died since 9/11 from 9/11 illnesses. And so we thought maybe that we would do a film about the park, is how it started. And then, to John's total credit is that he's been on camera so much that and he's done a lot of news and a lot of coverage. He's been covered quite a bit telling his story. But what we sort of wanted was, who is John? Like, not just what did he do, but who is he as a person, and how is this toll on him, and then that sort of spider webbed out to everybody else. Ray 100% was such a huge part of the narrative and our story, and we really grew to love him. And so I think that might have been a little difficult on John at the beginning, because we just kept following him around that initial shoot a little more than he wanted to. But it sort of, I think, from our perspective at least, it sort of got him used to us being there and not as conscious of what should I say next kind of thing. And then we just sort of slowly got to know John. And then because the story was over such a long period of time, I think we just sort of developed a bond with each other, and John with the crew, and I think everything sort of really opened up after that.
Brandon, there was never a bond between us. Trust me.
I was talking to Kelly.
When we were in my house or at the park, it was more intimate, and the cameras kind of bothered me. But when we were in DC, we were in my playground, and we were in the arena, and I didn't even know the cameras were there, and it allowed me to be at my best. But if you took me out of DC or Albany or anywhere, then I get a little uncomfortable.
You say that, and that's kind of one of the questions I wanted to ask, because this is really intimate stuff. Like, personal struggle, but also the emotion behind that. This is deeply, deeply emotional. So not only for you, but for you guys as filmmakers, were there hard moments to pull some of these extra guys to talk? We know we see Ray, we see.
They were crying all the time, bro.
And was it just like?
Yeah, we all cried. We cried all the time. You come to one of my events at my park every September. There's a lot of crying. Go to DC with us. There's a lot of crying. Crying doesn't make you weak. It makes you stronger, right? But you know, Kelly, Rob, Jamie, everybody else on that film crew, I seen them all cry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
a lot of tears.
A lot of tears, but also what was really hard too was, you know, you got to meet some people along the way that might not have been, you know, your A story or anything like that, but they were people that we got to meet, and they would share their stories with us. And then the next time we would come down, they wouldn't be there, and it would either be because they were too ill or they passed away. And that's when it really, like, all the sort of the way that kept going on throughout the years, and still does. I mean, that's the sad thing, is it still goes on. And as John said, he's been to so many funerals, and that's where it really gets you, is that you know you're telling a life and death story here that's well beyond any film.
You mentioned, John, that you wish that the team was there, you know, in the earlier days when you were building up this structure. What was it like sort of getting them up to speed on all these things and telling them about the history? Was there old footage that you guys had to comb through, and these old articles and the archival and all this information you have to get in your heads?
You know, people call me an advocate, an activist, a professional pain in the butt. But I think at the end of the day, Brandon, I'm an historian. And I've had a front row seat to everything. And Kelly and Rob are highly intelligent for Canadians. So they learn quick. And, you know, from 2003 and 4 all the way up until 2015, it was, you know, we were demonized, we were lied to, we were told go away. And in 2010, I created a system that you can take the fight to DC or your state capital and win. I don't consider our victories in the sense that we won, because too many people died and got sick. But there's a sense of relief and comfort knowing that we were responsible for aiding tens of thousands of people. And the documentary helped too. Just by people seeing the documentary and posting it on Facebook or Twitter, the website, and sending out emails, it brought people forward that would not have come forward, because there's still a lot of people that are sick that don't know about the programs.
Oh, 100%. I can't say the amount of times I got notes on our Facebook page or DMs on our Twitter feed from people who had seen a promo for the film, or someone had passed on the Facebook page, and they would write to me to say, hey, I went down that day to volunteer. I've been feeling sick for a while. Do you think that's connected to the number of people I connected to the program? Just, you know, from putting this film out there, it really made the heart feel good that we were opening people's eyes. And I still do it to this day with people who had seen the film, who had then told me, hey, I went down there and, you know, this is how my health has been over the years. Yeah, the fact that we're getting word out about the program through the film, just, it means a great deal to me, you know, it really does.
You know, you could have put anybody instead of me in that documentary, and the story would have been accurate, right? So, granted, no one else has done what I've done, and I don't say that to be pretentious. Anybody's story would have made the movie that much better than mine. My own personal story pales in comparison to those who are deathly ill or who have passed away. You know, people just don't die in the 9/11 community, and that's it. It leaves behind broken families, mentally, physically, and financially. There's a ripple effect to when these men and women die. And this documentary captures the pain that we've experienced and that we've had to endure. And, you know, everybody says, move on, get over it. Dude, there's no getting over it. You might be able to get over that day, but not what you've been all through the last 21 years.
A film like this has such a journey, not only for you, John, but you guys as filmmakers coming in when you did, the legal battles, everything like that. But when you finish a film, it has a journey too. What was it like, you know, getting it here to Discovery and taking the story that is so important and getting it out to people seeing it?
It was great. We were, as I mentioned, that we thought we had one version of the film, and then we ended up changing it for the better. And so when so we were back at the drawing board in a weird way and restructuring the film. And to address what you asked before about the 2010 and before, we did have to weave in those stories where we could, either from archives or from shots from the floor of the Congress floor and stuff like that, just to try to fill in so it wasn't just John telling us what happened, so we could feel like we were experiencing, even though we weren't there personally.
Yeah, I'm glad it went to Discovery. Because Discovery, like different channels, different platforms, different media outlets, they all have a base. Discovery's got a diverse base. And America is based on diversity. I don't care what your politics and your religion are. We are diverse, whether you like it or not. And the feedback that I've gotten from everybody who's seen this, they laughed, they cried, they got mad. And as common sense thinking people, and about 80% of Americans are common sense thinking people, I can't speak for Canada now, Rob and Kelly. It was hard for them to wrap their arms around what we went through. You know, they knew kind of like what we were going through, but they didn't realize what we were going through. And I think instead of me having to tell the story every 10 minutes, or a 9/11 responder or a volunteer or somebody who lived and worked and went to school in Lower Manhattan, the documentary speaks for us. And kudos to Rob and Kelly for capturing that, because that's important. And Discovery's diverse group, you know, I get emails literally all the time and tweets and messages on Twitter that they saw. You know, I watched your trailer. I can't wait to watch your movie tonight. Next day, I cried. I can't believe how angry I was. So kudos to that Rob and his team, because I played such a small part in it.
And it was so great working with Discovery Plus too. Like when they were relatively new, they were so new that they weren't even in Canada yet, as far as that when the film launched.
Who is in Canada?
I'm gonna send the Canadian consulate down to you soon. But it's just been terrific working with everyone at the team at Discovery Plus, and they really, right from the get-go, they really felt strongly attached to the film as well, and felt sort of it was an important film on their roster to try and get out and trying to put it out. And so the decision was made to release it closer to the 20th anniversary. So we had some time to sort of build up the fact that it was coming, and then when it finally came on the 20th, it really sort of hit the ground running. So yeah, it's been a great partnership with Discovery Plus.
You know, the film, you know what the film captures, Brandon? We're proud, we're Americans, and we pound our chest that we're the greatest nation in the world. And when you watch that documentary, you take a step back and say, really? Are we really the best nation in the world when we treat our heroes like that? And the documentary really shows that. And listen, I am the most patriotic person I know. I have Captain America tattooed on me. Literally, Captain America is tattooed on John Feal. And I'm a veteran of the United States Army. I'm a 9/11 responder. I'm a kidney donor to a complete stranger. Nobody gets more patriotic than this. Nobody has more love for humanity. But we need to be able to do a better job as a nation, collectively, to be able to help these men and women, because 9/11 is coming again. It's just going to have a different date. That's a fact.
And I wonder also if part of what, from our perspective, coming from Canada, the fact that we were telling this story as Canadians is that, I mean, it didn't make sense why they were having so much trouble getting healthcare, specifically healthcare, because we come from a totally different healthcare system than Americans do. So it kind of didn't make sense to us when we started this, but what we found really interesting was the more we dove into it, it didn't make sense to the Americans either. Like it really didn't make sense of, we need to protect those that protect us, and that we weren't, that wasn't happening in this case. And maybe there's other cases that doesn't happen too, but this specifically in this case. So maybe part of that came across of us being sort of one step removed as Canadians.
All right, I'll give you healthcare and beer. You got that on us, okay? And hockey. You got 3.
That's all. That's our hat trick right there.
So, I mean, it's been awesome talking to you guys. I really appreciate everything you shared, but I really want to leave this last question, and I would love for you guys to expound however you want. You mentioned the 20th anniversary, and that is how things coalesce for the release date. But it's been 20 years, and then like John mentioned, another thing can happen in the future. We don't know when it's going to happen, but this moment is core to so many people's lives, my life. What do you feel like is the cultural memory of 9/11 now, and how important is this film for everyone who's going to see it now and see it in the future going forward to not forget what happened and how it's still affecting us?
I'll let them go, because if I go, you're not even going to use it in your piece. So I'll let them go first.
Well, one thing that I find is that because it's been 20 years, there are people that were born in the last 20 years that don't really know much about 9/11. They might, hopefully they learned about it in school, but it may not be on their radar as much as we think it is. And I would sort of hazard a guess that many of them don't know the struggles of the men and women since 9/11. And so we got approached for the educational sort of sector of asking, is it possible to show it to students? And I thought that's a great testament to the film, because I really would love the next generation, as much as it's sort of being directed towards people that lived through 9/11, stuff like that. There is sort of an important factor that this document now exists within the documentary that can sort of highlight what happened, but what is happening right now for a whole new generation. So that for me personally is something that really resonates with me.
Yeah, and for me, there was a moment in the film that didn't make it to the cut that is out now, but we went to a school with John and Michael O'Connell, and just talked to these students, and watching John and Michael explain what it was all about to these little kids, and have them talk about it. And there was an assignment that they had to do on 9/11. Was just really wild to see. And even, like personally, relatives that I've got who weren't old enough when that happened, now relearning about it. I think we've just offered such a wonderful gift for them to learn and to read more and to go further in their education as to what happened that day. And for me personally, doing the film, I just came to realize I've got to be better at being kinder to my first responder on those days where they are not needed in crisis. And I get emotional thinking about it now, but I really wasn't great about checking in with my local firefighter, seeing how they were doing, seeing how the local, paramedic or cop was doing, because they have to put on such a bold front when they go in to do their job. They can't, they can't be like me and cry all the time, as I'm known to do. But they need to be in mind when they're out of mind, so.
Brandon, who won the World Series in 2005?
White Sox.
No, I mean,
Nice.
9/11 is generational. There are certain things you're just not going to remember unless you look it up. For the 9/11 community, it's Groundhog Day. It's Bill Murray movie. We live it every day. For the rest, human beings, are trained to move on from a traumatic event. Doesn't mean you forgot about it. You just trained to move on. If your parents died in a car accident, you'd remember them on their anniversaries, the holidays, their birthdays. And while you're scarred and emotionally disconnected from a lot of things, you move on with your life. Americans have moved on. Canadians have moved on. The rest of the world has moved on from 9/11. But everybody knows somebody who died that day. Everybody knows somebody who died since then. And while they've moved on, they certainly remember it on 9/11, because 9/11 is, while it's such an horrific day, it's a sacred day. And I don't think it will ever be tarnished through history, because it was our Pearl Harbor. And I appreciate Pearl Harbor. I wasn't there, but I know, looking at the devastation firsthand and working on that pile, I can only imagine what Pearl Harbor looked like. And these are certain dates that are just generational. And this movie is going to capture that. And, you know, we've spoken probably now at 300 schools, from elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, colleges, and we have to change our rhetoric. You got to know your room, what we can say, what we can't say. And the beautiful thing about it is that we challenge them to do projects, and then we reward them with scholarships or, you know, gift cards for the younger kids, get them involved. You know, I'm all about humanity. I don't have to like your politics. I don't have to like your religion. You just got to be a good person. And every day, you know, I don't need 9/11 brand to 9/11 doesn't define me. My injury doesn't define me. No responder left behind only captures a glimpse of what I'm really like and who I am. But it's my mother that defines me. And if she was alive, she'd probably smack me in the back of the head for cursing or, you know, doing something that she didn't approve of, but she'd be proud of me, because everything I do, you know, before I rushed here to do this Zoom, I literally took a homeless man off the street and put him in a hotel for a month. It had nothing to do with 9/11. It's because I wanted to do that for that individual. And that person now is going to be off the street for a month. And I continue to do these things without a camera in front of me, because I don't need a camera anymore. You know, last year at my park, when we did our Reading of the Names event, I told everybody I want to go home. And the documentary, the 20-year remembrance, not anniversary, I'm starting that journey home, because I haven't been home in 20 years. I go to my house, I got a roof over my head, but I want to go home. And I think I'm closer to that. And I think after John and I get this the burn pit bill passed, then I'll sit down and decide what is home for me. But I'm glad that Rob and Kelly and the team, they got 5 years, 5 hard years, and a glimpse of what we went through. Because, you know, even when I was out there barking and biting and getting into fights and moving the ball down the field, I struggled myself. And I am never the smartest man in the room. My IQ hovers around room temperature. But I have the ability not to accept no for an answer when people are sick and dying. And if anybody in Canada or the United States or in this world believes in a cause so passionately, then they can be better than what I did, because I didn't invent the wheel. I just made the wheel faster and stronger. And anybody can do it if I can.
John, thanks so much for that. It's been a pleasure. All of your work. Hope you find that in a home and go home that you're looking for. And thank you, Rob. Thank you, Kelly, for joining us and sharing the film. It's been a pleasure to have you guys here at Dr. NYC Spring Showcase. Thanks so much.
I look forward to seeing you guys in May.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.